Welcome to this ISPS-US webinar, and I'd like to welcome our presenters, Gogo and Emma. So I'm first going to introduce Gogo, who's going to share. So Gogo Akaya is an ancestral medicine healer connected to the traditions of Southern Africa, Isangoma practices. Her experiences with mental health crisis profoundly shifted into a beautiful journey of growth and initiations that eventually led her to supporting others with spiritual ascension symptoms. So she's an author and a mentor with a global practice rooted in the concepts of Ubuntu. Gogo is a founding partner of the Psychosis Foundation, I might not have said that right, where she teaches African shamanism. Some of you may have seen her featured in the film Crazy Wise, or you might have seen her presentation at the 2017 ISPS-US conference, which has easily been our most popular ever ISPS-US video on YouTube, because it has about 70,000 views. That indicates a wide interest in what she has to say. So, but without further ado, Gogo, let's turn it over to you and see what you have to say today.
Thank you. Good morning here in Southern California. And good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I am grateful to be here again as a part of the ISPS-US panelist discussion on this very important topic, working through psychosis in extreme states and alternative to suppression. And I just want to first begin to talk a little bit about who I am and the work that I do now. So part of my work is definitely to help counsel people, help people to navigate people through rites of passages, through initiations, through healing journeys, through a spiritual lens of ancestral healing, ancestral work. And the tradition that I began from is a tradition out of South Africa, which is the Bangoma tradition, or Ngoma, which are the shamanic healers from South Africa that are connected to earth medicines, earth-based medicine, who are connected through mediumship. We are connected through our ancestors, the memory of our ancestral guardians that help us that we have this ability and function to tap into divine communication with the ancestors of the mountains, the ancestors of the trees, the ancestors of the earth, the ancestors of the sacred waters, the ancestors of the wind, the ancestors of the sun, of the fire. And this energy or ability to cross over into other worlds, into other dimensions and other spaces helps us to pick up information and bring it into physical form, whether it be the communication with the plants, the communication with the elements, and help bring and carry a medicine forward for those that we serve. And this is an old, ancient ancestral wisdom that's been passed down from generation to generation to generation. I was born here in the United States and didn't know anything about African spirituality or African shamanism, let alone anything that was alternative in terms of the expression of labels and diagnoses that are experienced from Western medicine, which was depression, which was borderline personality disorder, and others. And there was no awareness or invitation of what else these experiences could possibly be, and also hearing voices as well. And so when I learned about African traditional healing, I learned that there's these ancestral guardians that I carry with me, that have been passed down from generation to generation, this wisdom that I was able to also access. And so I went through initiations, initiation to become a Sangoma, and then thereafter, other initiations that helped to continue me on this rites of passage through the medicine work, through continued healing and continued learning and growth. And so the Sangoma also has, there's another umbrella under the Ngoma tradition, which is the medicine person or the Inyanga. And Sangomas can also be Inyangas, or we have the ability to communicate with the plant medicines. And so I have been moving into this energy in the space of also working with the plant medicines as well. And the Inyangas, Inyanga in Zulu actually means the moon. And so we are relating the energy of the plant medicine along with the cycles of the moon to be able to understand the cycles and the patterns of life and how to access wisdom and healing from those cycles and phases of our life. So now I work a lot with helping people through those different phases of their life that may have been missed or forgotten. And those are our rites of passages and initiations, which I'll talk a little bit about as we go along. So as I said, my journey was, for a long time, I suffered a lot through depression. I suffered a lot through self-harm. I suffered a lot through just not knowing who I was, not having a purpose, not being grounded. And then through that, there's like this gateway that opened up, and I began to see visions and have experiences of energies and ancestors that were around me, and tactile sensations, or all of these things that I did not know how to comprehend it and where to put this, other than go to the hospital and seek help and get medication. And those things were a part of help saving my life in terms of having a place to go and being safe in some of those spaces. And at other times, it didn't feel safe at all. And it didn't feel, I wasn't connected to the medications. And so eventually I came across a Sangoma who was practicing here in the United States, and who is my Baba, or my teacher, my Gobella. And she was able to help me to see that I wasn't just a sick person, that I actually had these gifts, and these gifts were connected to an ancestral path, an ancestral tradition that helped me in those medicine works, and that initiation helped me to navigate and kind of understand where it makes sense of what was happening with me outside of just the Western medicine. And so what I like to call, what psychosis is really Ascension Madness, or the upgrade that happens when our spirit, we talk about mind, body, and spirit, but mind, body, and spirit is ready for an upgrade. And when that request for growth and that request for change is being alerted within our system, our physical system, our spiritual system, our mind, our brains, then this can create chaos, because what it is an alert system that's going off, that may be going off gently at first. And then over time, it begins to increase and increase and increase until it's a serious matter. And then it turns into quote unquote madness or psychosis. And Ascension Madness comes when there is a long occurring disharmony with the self, a disharmony with nature, a disharmony with spirit. And the alert system is constantly being activated, which can become overwhelming, which for me, again, it was tactile sensations, it was hearing voices, it was having ultra sensitivities and awarenesses that just wasn't making a lot of sense and was like really, really frightening and scary. And so the indigenous traditions have long understood that there is earth-based medicine in the form of ritual, in the form of ceremony, in the form of earth medicines or herbs. And a combination of these things can help walk us through the fire of change, the transformative energy of upgrading from one state of being, a very uncomfortable state of being, a state of being where it may feel like I am no longer in need of the things that are coming up for me, and something needs to shed, something needs to be let go of. I need to change because I can't be in this body here the way that I've been for the last 20 or 30 years or 40 years, right? And so when this opportunity for growth happens, and I call Ascension Madness an opportunity for growth because it really is. And it was about me changing my perspective of just being one that was going to live with these illnesses for the rest of my life, to a understanding that I had medicine within my DNA, a memory within my DNA that could be activated in order to remember the ways of healing, of self-healing and communal healing as well. We talk a little bit about Ubuntu, and Ubuntu is the practice of community, of oneness, of each person in the community being a vital aspect of the greater humanity, that every person is important, every person is needed. And so when we look through the lens of Ubuntu, we're able to see ourselves as each other and lift each other up and help each other through ways of communal practice, ways of moving from individualism into the space of community and oneness. And so Ascension Madness is also, even though we may go through periods of isolation, we may go through periods of loneliness or hiding, Ascension Madness to me helps us to open up to the greater possibilities of connection, of oneness, of the medicine that's within the energy of community. And so there are a few things in my own healing process, I'm just keeping track of the time here, and in my own practice that I just want to kind of pinpoint today that really helped me on the journey, but also this is how I support people now. And those three things are dream work, dream tracking, dream work, ritual and ceremony, and then also earth-based medicines or herbs. And so I'll start with dream tracking. Dreaming and tracking your dreams in African spirituality, we're always looking, we actually have a song that helps us to support, helps us to wake up and remember our dreams. And the energy of the song is about wake up, wake up, wake up, share your dream. Share your dream with the community, share your dream with the family, because inside of that is a message. What did you bring back from the ancestral realm? What did the ancestors show you? What was spoken in your dreams? And so there's also another saying that when we are not remembering our dreams, then there is something that is off or just off balance, or needs to come back into harmony so that we can remember the importance of our dream space. And so whether you're forgetting dreams because you're overworked and you have high levels of stress, or that part of the brain is blocking out the dream space because you're going into really deep spaces. But we all have the ability to remember our dreams, or wake up and remember. And there are indigenous medicines in the Sangoma tradition that help support us to gently ease back into remembering our dream space. And then being held, one of the things that in my initiation processes have been about sharing the dream, but also having someone to wake up in the morning with me, or read a text message in the afternoon about what that dream was, what it meant. And then I became the best interpreter of my dream. I didn't have to go here and there to find out these interpretations. After sitting in community for a while and understanding, oh, this is how my soul is responding. This is how my spirit is responding. This is how my mind is responding. And there's medicine within the dream space. And so indigenously, we've known for eons that the medicine is also in the dream space in terms of our own healing. It has the ability to reveal what is hidden, to find our philo. There's a practice in the Ngoma tradition. It's like finding what is hidden in philo, is finding what is missing in terms of your own healing. What is the root cause of something, and what's the remedy? And finding the virus, or the spiritual virus, that has plagued our own birthright, that helps us to uncover the veil that we've either hidden from ourselves, or society has been helpful with that, in understanding what our birth story is, why we came into this life. And then also being open to challenging the stories that I've created, and that I've become attached to, and being able to face those truths within the dream space. Not only within the dream space, but then bringing the medicine from the dream space into the physical form, into the reality of your day. And so we do a lot of tracking. So we go from maybe this point at the beginning of starting with dreams, and we intentionally work for whether it be months or longer to begin to understand the trajectory and the story that the soul, the spirit, is expressing through the dream space. And the other part of the healing that really was helpful for me was the imuti. Imuti are the herbs, the sacred herbs and the plant medicines. And they are really things that help us to undergo these initiations. We initiate to these plant spirits, the spirits of the trees, the roots of the plants. We initiate back to them so that we remember how to earth ourselves and create a grounding cord for what is wanting to exist and shift within our body, within our mind, and within our spirit. And so the herbs that I was able to partake in were ancient medicines, old medicines from Africa, and from also South America, and from this land in America, that were able to support me through widening my perspective, bringing consciousness into my dream space, and helping me to really face fears and overcome them, and walk through those things, and walk through the things that became distorted within my spiritual system, within my mind, within my body. And it was all about bringing myself back to the nature of these medicines. And so the medicines, the initiation medicines were about recovering ancestral memory, right? Again, I talked about root and remedy, like going in and finding what is hidden, what is stored within the shadow of the mind, within the shadow of the spirit, that we haven't been able to consciously bring forward into the space of knowing, into the space of light, into the space of truth. And so the medicines were also about unlocking the sacredness of life, of regaining a sacred memory within that helped me to evolve and recover and grow through the madness. The last part of this, is the ritual. The ritual was the opportunity to honor my creativity in the way that perhaps I didn't understand how to access creative energy and the portal of creativity that was coming through me, that it created so much hypersensitivity, and I wasn't clear on how to access creativity and sit with all of that enormous energy and vast energy of creativity. And when I would feel these urges of creativity, sometimes I could express very well and beautifully, and the other times I was completely frightened and it became overwhelming. And I know a lot of artists that go through this. And so ritual helps us to have a bit of organization around our honoring our creativity. So it was bringing myself back to the rhythm of the heart, which is the drum, which is the sacred drum of my ancestors, the people that walk with me, the people that I'm made up of, the stars that I'm made up of. Yeah, all of those materials. And honoring my song again, finding my song, finding the missing parts and the missing aspects of the sacred words and the sacred lyrics and the sacred sounds that were evolving and shifting and bringing harmony back into my system. And so also, of course, reconnecting back to nature, meaning how do I bring balance and harmony back to the earth inside of me? How do I bring harmony back to the breath, the air inside? How do I allow the fire of illumination to exist within me without burning everything up? How do I work with my internal waters? How do I access the internal waters to create emotional freedom and existence? And these are the things that I learned through ritual, through ceremony, through rites of passage. And so the voices in this journey became my teachers. How did they become my teachers? Because I was able to now be in acceptance, first of all, not run, not hide, not try to dismantle, not fight, not suppress, but actually stand up and listen. Stand up and listen to it and have compassion for the voice that was there to teach me something. My voices were harmful. They seem to be traumatizing. That's the perspective that I had, right? But then as I continued to grow, I understand that this was an invitation for healing. And when I had that perspective, I'm like, okay, what is the voice really saying? It's coming from a place of hurt. It's coming from a place of pain. It's coming from a place of abuse. And now how do I nurture that? How do I respond to it gently? how do I create a relationship with the voice so that now it can become an actual, like a team member, as opposed to an offense to my spirit and my soul and my body. And so there was a medicine inside that virus or the madness that helped me to ascend. But at the time, I wasn't able to see it as medicine within itself. And so that's a little bit about how I healed and how I was able to change perspective through ritual, through ceremony, through the medicines of the earth, and through the tracking of the dreams. We've gone on a little bit, probably a little over time, so I just want to say thank you, and I look forward to responding to the Q&As.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think we could have listened to you go on and on for a long time, but I think people were really I think everything lit up when you talked about mind, body, spirit, ready for an upgrade. And I think that's just a really powerful way of looking at it. So thanks. Well, we're going to have a lot more time to hear from you on the question and answer, but right now we're going to switch over to hearing a little from Emma Good, who's an international award-winning documentary filmmaker and is the author of the book My Beautiful Psychosis, which is a memoir. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology and English and began her career at the BBC. She went on to set up an award-winning production company called Green Lane Films, which makes documentaries that inspire change. And her most recent commission is a film about open dialogue, a new system of mental health care being introduced now, going from Finland to be introduced to the NHS in the UK. And Emma, having had 6 psychiatric admissions, one of them under involuntary commitment, she's keen to change the perception of psychosis from that of a devastating and stigmatizing illness. And she helped co-found the Spiritual Crisis Network in the UK and is a mental health campaigner and advocate for spiritual approaches to psychosis. She currently lives in Buenos Aires, where she's following her passion for dancing tango and writing her next book, which is on Tango, Camino, and Romeo. So, okay, well, maybe without further ado, Emma, I want to hear from you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ron. Thanks for that lovely introduction. And thanks, Gogo. That was amazing. And just before I start, I just want to say a special shout out to Jen McDonald, who has introduced me to the ISPS. So that's why I'm here today. I'm actually broadcasting from a camper van in Devon at the moment on my beautiful book tour. So I hope you can all hear me. I hope you can all see me. The light's a bit strange because the sun is setting in England, and I hope my Wi-Fi survives. After that wonderful resume of my career, I'd like to give you my psychosis resume. I've had 12 or 13, I've actually lost count now, episodes of what this psychiatric profession would call psychosis. I've had treatment in the developed world, in the developing world, in private healthcare and public hospitals. And as Ron mentioned, once under a section, which means involuntary commitment in the US. And I've also stayed at home, so I have a variety of settings to compare and contrast with. Diagnosis that I've received are bipolar, schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia, and more recently in Argentina, I was seeing a psychiatrist for every week for about half an hour talking. So she got to know me pretty well, and she came up with cyclical psychosis. I am generally prescribed antipsychotics. The first one, in the first episode, I was given haloperidol. Then they changed it to olanzapine, and I didn't like that either. Eventually, they settled on quetiapine. And in Argentina, not surprisingly, the psychiatrist prescribed lithium. And lithium is produced in Argentina, so I'm not surprised that that's the way they go here. Personally, I prefer not to take it, so I found ways to go through it without using medication. So now I stay at home and I don't take medication. I just want to put a little caveat in there. I do actually, when I'm completely desperate and can't sleep and have insomnia, I do self-medicate with a quarter of the lowest dose of quetiapine, purely to get to sleep, because I don't like sleeping tablets and I don't like tranquilizers. And when all other resources have failed to me and it's a bit of an emergency situation, I will take a quarter of that and then sleep and then not take any more. It's totally as and when. So although this, this webinar is all about working through psychosis rather than suppressing it, I don't want to persuade anybody not to take medication if that's the only help they have. But there is so much more we could be doing, and that's why I'm here to talk about that. I just want to say a little bit about my first couple of episodes. The first one was triggered by, I decided to give up smoking cannabis, and whenever I tried, I couldn't get to sleep. So I would always go back to it. But then something happened in my personal life and I decided, absolutely, I'm seeing this through. No matter what, I'm giving up cannabis. And no matter what was actually 5 nights without sleep. And gradually, as more and more nights built upon themselves, I started to have strange experiences, and I wasn't mostly enjoying them. They were interesting and I wasn't worried about them. But I don't remember this bit, but I called a friend who I was supposed to be visiting at the weekend and said I probably couldn't make it. And apparently I'd mentioned that I thought I might die, I was going to die. So that she didn't know what had been happening to me, and that rang alarm bells. So she asked her partner to come and see how I was. And so then, he didn't know what to do, and he took me to my parents' house, and they didn't know what to do. By this time, I couldn't really communicate because I was so in my own inner world that I didn't know what to say or how to reach out to people. So I just collapsed on the floor because I was completely at a loss. And so they didn't know what had happened or whether I'd taken something or anything. So I was taken to hospital in an ambulance, and I had 3 weeks in hospital. And, as well as thinking that the smoke alarm was fitted with a camera and they were watching me. And I also had what I would call spiritual experiences. I saw auras. I heard this totally angelic voice that helped me in the deepest hour of need on the ward. And as I was looking in the mirror and criticizing myself, it was behind me, and she said, "You are beautiful." And that's why I've called it my beautiful psychosis, really in honor of that voice. I had past life memories coming up, like nurses tucking me into bed. And then I had this sort of vision in my mind that I was back in another century on a muddy track. And it was these same 2 nurses there. And my carriage, I'd been pulled out of my carriage, and these 2 nurses were robbing me. And I remember thinking, oh, that's interesting. The nurses are caring for me now, they're tucking me in. But I've since mentioned this story to somebody else, and they said, oh, actually, maybe the nurses were still robbing you, robbing you of your freedom. I also had access to my subconscious. So I knew things that my conscious mind has purposely forgotten because it was traumatic, and in order to survive, it's sort of just kept it in the subconscious level. And this I became aware of in the hospital, and I knew that I'd been sexually abused as a child. And so I told my mum this, and later when I was discharged from hospital, she said, "Do you remember what you said?" And I said, "What? Yeah, about the sexual abuse." She said, "Yes. Do you remember what happened?" I said, "Oh, it's not true, you know," because I was kind of back to normal, like my ego was returned. And I didn't remember it. I don't remember it. I still don't remember it. But I did find out years and years later that it was actually true, because another family member had been as well, and they still remembered, and they confirmed that it had happened to both of us. So it's fascinating that, you know, what I was able to access. So for me, it felt like I was having some kind of spiritual awakening, but also it was kind of odd because it was, you know, it was all this horrible, scary stuff as well. And I didn't really know what was going on. And so when I went to the meeting with a consultant psychiatrist and I said, "What's happened to me?" They said, "Well, you know, as far as we can tell, you've had some kind of psychotic episode, probably triggered by cannabis." And I was devastated. I cried my eyes out. You know, they didn't have any tissues in the room when they were telling me this. It was like such a blow, because I thought I was having some kind of spiritual awakening. And I was prescribed antipsychotics, and, you know, changed them onto another one, and, you know, went down all of that route, and was in hospital for 3 weeks. And when I decided to stop taking them, it was suggested by my parents, because they really weren't helping me. They were, you know, I was having really awful effects from them. So I got support from my parents. They said, "You're fine now, you know, why don't you stop taking them?" So I had family support to do that, because that really helped me. I wouldn't have even considered it. I would have just suffered it. And so then having a conversation with a psychiatrist, you know, they said, "Oh, well, you know, if it happens again, then it might not work as well." And I thought, well, what stupid medication if it's not going to work as well? And anyway, I thought to myself, I was quite stubborn, like, it's not going to happen again. You know, I've given up cannabis now. That's that. I'm done. And it didn't actually. I had 6 years went by, and, you know, I'd not forgotten about it, but, you know, I'd rebuilt my life. And I was working in television and in between contracts. So I'd gone for 2 interviews and was quite stressed out. So I decided to take myself home and relax. And I lay on the bed and I put my hands on myself just to relax. And I could feel this like wispy energy coming out of the palms of my hands, and it went into my body and relaxed all these parts of my body. And it was so good. I just kind of moved my hands around and did that for hours and hours until it started to go dark. And I sat up in bed and thought, "Oh, wow, it's going dark. I've been here for hours." And I felt a little bit different. And then I had this thought again, this weird feeling. It was more of a feeling. It was like, I'm going to die. And I knew I wasn't going to die. Like, I knew my body wasn't going to die. I wasn't going to die, but I couldn't shake it. It was like, I feel like I'm going to die. And I remembered, you know, from the first episode that had rung alarm bells. So that rang alarm bells for me. And I phoned a friend, and then my parents got involved and all of that. And this time my parents looked after me at home. And I was allowed to just roll with it. You know, I just kind of let it all unfold inside me. And there was one incident where I was lying on the ground in the living room, and I just felt this urge to roll my body around. And so my head was like this. And to me, I would say it was like my psyche was playing a game of charades with me. Like, it was making my body, that I allowed myself to do, act out something to tell me something. And so I went with it, and I was like, "Oh, it's like I've been hung. Oh yeah, I've been hung." And then I thought, "Oh, I feel like a witch that's been hung." And as soon as I had that thought, it moved on. Like, the energy in my body changed, and I stood up, and then I was climbing a rock, and then I fell off a rock, and then I was on a bicycle and falling off a bicycle, and all of these things playing out, which as soon as I had the thought, "Oh, these are all ways I've come close to death," that urge stopped. And then I realized, oh, I think I was a witch in a past life that was hung, and you know, the witches, you know, they were the original medicine women. They were the healers, and they were, you know, there was a witch hunt for them. They were a threat to the church. And so there was a genocide of them in the 16th and 17th centuries, and millions of them were killed. And I completely related to this story. It felt like this was my story. And I felt like I was still in a witch hunt, like my spirituality was being seen like the witches were witches and they had to be killed, you know, that somehow my spirituality had to be killed, you know, by the psychiatric system. So I felt like I was in a very modern day witch hunt. And after that, I started to read around, and that's where I heard about spiritual emergency. And the more I learned about that different perspective, the more it supported my view of what I thought was happening. But at this point, I really want to make a distinction between two things, because I find this really, I still struggle with it. You know, I had an episode last year, so it's not all done and dusted, and I'm an expert and I know how to do it all. It's still ongoing, and I'm still making sense of it. But I've noticed that like there are two different things that are slightly different, and I would look at them differently, and they have completely opposite ways of working with them, which is crucial, I think. One is the psychosis side, which is it, you know, it's all those symptoms that it's like I'm being watched, and they're not necessarily true, you know, they're strange thoughts. And I would call this psychosis with spiritual features. You know, I have all the spiritual stuff, but this is psychosis coming from the insomnia, the side where my brain really needs to sleep. It's not functioning very well. And that I'd question whether I would want to work with it or pull back from it, really find ways to pull back and get to sleep. Sleep is what helps me with that. But then there's the other side, which it is spiritual. You know, since that second episode, I've had many more that have been triggered by Qigong and Shiatsu, and I'm working with spiritual practices. And it's that kind of, I get out of hand with that, and then it turns a bit psychotic. Sorry to use this like as if psychosis and spiritual is different, but it just helps me kind of work with it. And when it's the more spiritual side, it's much more like I would go with it, I would allow it, but I wouldn't like allow, let's explore sleeplessness and allow that to be, because I really need to sleep, you know, I definitely need to sleep. So I've had to kind of really recognize and get real and honest with myself, which is which, because it's so tempting when I haven't slept and it all starts going on, like to go with it. You know, even recently, before I traveled back to the UK, I had a patch of insomnia because I had some stress in my life, and I woke up in the, you know, I didn't wake up, sorry. I'd had 2 nights without sleep, and I went to the bathroom, and I could, when the water was dropping, my urine and water was dropping to the sink or the toilet, it was like it was talking to me, and I could tell that this was different to the consciousness of water giving me a message. You know, that could happen. I've had messages from dolphins, and that's very different. That's like I'm plugged into the ground and this message is clear and I know what the message is. But this wasn't like that. This was like the sound of the water was the auditory part of the sound of the water in my brain was also connecting with language formation. So it was sounding like language, it was sounding like speech, but it wasn't really saying anything. A bit like birds. I mean, sometimes, you know, I have messages from animals, but sometimes I have birds, you know, are doing the same thing, and it's nonsense. It's not always. Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. So I want to make that distinction. And so, you know, I might want to avoid it. You know, when we first went into lockdown recently in the pandemic, it just really it wasn't a spiritual awakening. You know, it was anxiety. I was in a state, I needed some help and I wasn't sleeping. And, you know, at that point, I took a little bit of medication to help me sleep and grounded myself. I found, like, the parks were closed, but I asked my psychiatrist, like, could you let me go to the hospital garden? Would I be allowed to walk all that way? It was like completely outside my bounds. I was breaking the law, breaking the rules. It was law, actually. They were arresting people. And she gave me permission. She said, yes, sure. So I grounded myself, as well as took a little bit of quetiapine to get my sleep back, you know, because I think that's really, really important, not to get out of hand. I don't want to end up in hospital, in all that situation, in a strange country, you know, in a pandemic, in hospital. So I make that choice for myself. So I wouldn't work through my sleeplessness and the insomnia. I would, like, do what I can to pull back from it. And nature I found absolutely crucial. Like, one time I felt like my head was just in knots and full of energy. And I sat under a tree and I could feel the energy leaving my head, going into the tree. And the more it did that, the just calmer I felt, the more slowed down. And I stood up and I felt completely normal again and clear. You know, nature, it's wise and slow and in sync, and connecting with it really, really helps me. But the second lockdown is like a different version. I was having a bit of a spiritual awakening. You know, I was feeling like my heart was opening, and I was living with these cats at the time who sat on my chest and purred and purred and purred into my heart. And I've since heard that somebody's measured some vibration scale of something, I don't really know what, but cats purring is at like the top level of 500. So I knew I was having this awakening experience. And then I'm part of a meditation group, and the meditation, I think, catapulted me into the astral. And then I started to struggle a bit and be unable to sleep. So that's like spiritual awakening, with insomnia coming after. It's like awakening, I'm awake, and then where's the sleeping? I need to switch it off. How do I switch off this awakening? I need to sleep. And so I come a bit unstuck with the lack of sleep and the effect that it has on my brain, because actually psychosis can be triggered with the right conditions for anyone, and sleeplessness is one of those. So those are like the two ways that I would look at it. You know, one I would pull back from, and the spiritual stuff I might work more with. And in helping with that, the by far the best thing that's helped me with that is meditation outside of an extreme state. So you wouldn't want to learn it if you're in an extreme state. I don't think, anyway. It's best to learn it outside of that. It's a bit like trying out you've never surfed before and you go straight for the massive wave in Hawaii. It's a little bit foolish, and you're probably going to fall off and have to get the rescue on you. So, you know, try with the surfboard on the beach first, and stand up and surf on the beach first before you go into the big waves. So I've learned with meditation, I've learned to disidentify from my thinking mind and my thoughts. And so in a psychosis, that could be all those crazy thoughts. Is I become more and more aware of thoughts, and that I'm not thoughts, I'm not identified with them, so that they can be there, and I accept them and welcome them. And if I judge them, I welcome that I've judged them. And if I run away with a thought and I realize, oh, all right, you know, I'm across the globe in another country right now in my mind. I come back to awareness. And that creates a really good practice container so that when you're experiencing things like, I think that smoke alarm's got a camera fitted in it, and you're like, that might be true, that might be true, that's a thought, that's not like I believe it. It's like you stay open. So practicing that outside of that state really helps. But it's taught me a huge thing, because the more I cultivate that, the more I become aware of this subtle presence, this loving presence all around, in everything, in me. It is me, it's everyone. And the more I feel that, the stronger that makes me. But the closer that I get to that, the more my mind is terrified of it. It tries to rush away with another thought and convince me of all kinds of things, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, or whatever it comes up with. It does its utmost to keep me away from that. It's like the closer I get to it, the louder and more crazy my mind gets to not take me there, because I think we all have this original wound that we arrived in this planet, in this world, out of a womb, innocent and full of grace and connected with it. And you can see it in babies, it's sparkling through their eyes, they're divine. And at some point that got wounded, and it was our first wounding, and that took us away and separated us from that divine. And then we've struggled our whole life, then coping with everything else that goes on in our lives. And coming back to that space, I realize when I get close to that, it's my ego that sets off my mind. I'm going to die. My ego knows it's going to die. So that thought, I'm going to die, that's where it's coming from. And it is going to die. My ego does die because I'm no longer in my ego. I am the loving presence of all that is. And so I have this container which allows the terror of the ego that it's going to die and still stay with this loving presence. And that's psychosis for me. And I've used that word because it's in my title of my book. I'm trying to reclaim it. The word psychosis, the word psyche is Greek for soul, spirit, and the word osis means process. So psychosis is actually a soul or spiritual process. So I want to reclaim that word and put it in my title. And for me, it reconnected me with a spiritual realm that I'd obviously lost sight of as a baby, or whenever that original wound was. It made me aware of childhood trauma, which was running my life and not doing a very good job of it, the hiding of the trauma and the acting out, and that needed addressing, and I became aware of that through that episode. And also I've just discovered so much more about what it means to be human, like the massive, most extreme human you can be. I don't play it safe. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but it has shaped the person that I am today, and I'm living a really fulfilling life, full of adventure, following my soul, connecting with myself, connecting with you guys, connecting with the world in a profound and meaningful way. And writing my book has been a therapeutic and cathartic process. And it's helped me reclaim my story and empower me and take my place in the world. And so if you don't want to know more about that story, then please, I'm going to plug my book. Do order it. And actually, I've got a link. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to put a link in there in the chat, because if you order it through this link, it's really insane, but I get paid almost the same for selling my book through Amazon as I do royalties for being the author of having written it. Such is our sales culture at the moment. So I'm just going to copy and paste the links. There's one for the US, there's one for the UK. Sorry for everybody else in the world. There is, hopefully there's Amazon where you are. Where's the chat? I've lost the chat.
Okay.
Oh, there we
Well,
go. No, got it. Here we go.
Yeah.
Did that work? Yes. And thank you very much for listening. Did it arrive? I got to scroll down.
I think make sure you're posting it to see
Okay.
everyone
Oh
to
yes,
see.
sorry, to
It's
everyone.
gotta go
Right there, everyone.
yeah.
Thanks, Ron.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Now I said that we were.
Is it there?
Yeah. Seen it yet, but anyway, you'll figure it out.
Yes.
I wonder. We're going to have question and answer now. First, I wonder if Gogo and Emma, if you have anything that you want to ask each other, I'll give you a chance to do that. But if not, we can go right to question and answer from the audience.
No, I just want to say, Emma, what an amazing story. What an amazing way to bring things into a perspective that actually works. And that's what the healing journey is about, is finding our own medicine in these experiences. So I just want to give gratitude for you sharing.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gogo. I resonated with everything that you said, and you're like this alternative me, that really different life, and to have more of a shamanic journey with it, because I have this like fantasy that I will meet my teacher, my shaman, that's going to help me out, and that's just never happened. Actually, for me, what happened was, whenever I thought I'd met them, you know, it all went horribly wrong and they'd sectioned me, or, you know, so I've had to figure it out on my own, and I found what you're sharing so grounding, and what you're embodying is so powerful, and it's what I'm aiming for. It's like, oh, to be able to bring that into the world is really inspiring. So thank you.
Emma, I noticed, even though you said you haven't been trained in it, this idea that, you know, like if you read about shamanism, the idea of that shaman going through a death experience or sometimes dismemberment is just very classic part of the journey. And it seems you had to figure out for yourself that, oh, that's what's happening. And I think it relates to what Gogo said about your mind, body, spirit being ready for an upgrade, that in order to do an upgrade, the old one has to kind of like die off, which is the can be the scary and upsetting part. But when you realize it's not a tragedy, but hey, something's actually ready to move and change. A lot of what our questioners are wondering about is, Emma, you were touching on it, but how you sort out between when you're heading into, you know, disunity and problems and trouble versus when there's some gifts that are there, something positive or spiritual. And so anything more that comes up that you want to say about either of you about that right now for our audience?
I'm not quite sure of the question. So say again.
Well, you know, that in these experiences, there can be a lot of disunity and trouble, or what people might call illness. But then on the other hand, there's also gifts and spiritual growth. And to some extent, it might make sense to try to sort out which path you're headed down. Like Emma, you were saying, you do that some with, you know, trying to distinguish between experiences that are based on lack of sleep and all that. But I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah. Well, it's moment to moment, ongoing. I suppose I use. I think I have to be really, really honest with myself. You know, how does this feel? If this is feeling like scary and horrible and like makes me feel bad, then I am less likely to. Oh, it's so difficult. It's like want to follow it more, you know? So just naturally for me, if my experiences make me feel really bad, like I can't function best, then I follow where I function best, and learning is a long process to learn my needs. You know, do you need water? Do you need sleep? What do you need? And there's also, when the spiritual experiences are, they just feel good. I can't, there's nothing more I can quite distinguish between the two, really, that I allow them more. I can relax into them more and allow them more. I don't know if this is any help at all. It's a very difficult question. Maybe read my book and see if I answer it in that. I think I need something more specific, because there's so many experiences. Like if I'm having this one, I might do this. And if I'm having this one, I might do that. And it's quite hard to encompass like one answer with all of this array of experiences.
You know, Emma, one of the things that you were talking about was like this container that you created. And what I've also noticed in this journey, you know, there's a container that I built upon, you know, with the ancestral practices and the ancient medicines. And what I've noticed through even ongoing things that have happened, ongoing ascensions or upgrades that have happened, even since I became a Sangoma and doing this work, is that I'm, you know, as I'm being called to grow again. So every 2 years I might have a, you know, a perceived episode, but it's for me, it's been an invitation, even when it's uncomfortable, because the growth, even the things that don't feel great, even the really, really scary things, because there is a container that I feel safe in, because I've been able to pick up certain tools, like these different aspects of nature, these medicines, this ancestral wisdom, and you know, many other things, people, community. I can gently go into those spaces as opposed to being dragged in, and accept the invitation. You know, last year I had an experience of another invitation, right? Or an episode, right? So this invitation, I gently said yes to it, because I noticed that when I began to move my lens into, not saying that you don't do self-care and do the tools, right? And bring the tools in that you need. What do I need? Do I need more water? Do I need more this, that, nature? All of those things, yes. But then because I'm also in this beautiful container of wisdom, I can walk into those shadows and walk into those deep places that are uncomfortable and dark and heavy and deep, and find the medicine within that. And I think that's what rites of passages and you know, self-initiations or shamanic initiations or whatever, you know, whatever, you know, Buddhism, any practices can help us to navigate even those uncomfortable places. And in modern society, of course, sometimes we have 9 to 5s, we have requirements, we have children, and we can't always be held in the spaces of, well, I'm going to accept the invitation to, you know, take the dive into the deep primordial waters of finding the root of this, this heaviness, this uncomfortableness. And so a part of, I think, what we need more of in our society, what we need more of in our practices, is these immersions, these spaces of, I'm allowed to go in. I'm allowed to go in even when it's like, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a bit, you know, I'm going to be, you know, maybe all over the place or really trying to find my grounding. But I don't recommend doing it alone. I don't recommend doing it without a container. I don't recommend like letting go of all the tools and the practices that you know that keep you well. It's about all of that. And also, how do we create these safe spaces for like the experience that I had last year, which I was alone. in my house doing it by myself, but I had enough of the initiations and the mentors and stability to be able to navigate through it and say yes to the experience.
Beautiful. Yes, that's actually really helped me formulate my response to the question. So again, it is a recent experience, and I was in this astral realm, and I felt this psychic attack around me, and because I was alone and I didn't know, like, I don't know what to do with any of this. I'm not trained in any of this, and I made a promise to myself not to end up in hospital again. And until I get that, I'm choosing not to fully go in it, like you recommended. And so I actually sought out a Reiki therapist, the Reiki practitioner, who one session of Reiki brought me back from the astral. All of these psychic attacks were switched off, you know. And I know that I've worked with spiritual energies and helping energies move through my heart back to the light, and I kind of done that intuitively, and I really want to find a way that I can do that in a grounded way, and I need my teacher and a guide, like you said. And because I was completely alone, I actually called up Catherine Lucas from the Spiritual Crisis Network in the UK and told her what was happening, and she really helped just say, okay, this is all really good. Well, you know, you're really making good progress. It's amazing what you're doing. Just having that to say, actually, yeah, it's all good. It's all okay. In the moment, I didn't have to spin out, and, you know, that really, really helped. So yes, thank you. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Here's a question. Someone's asking, how do you get someone who's really in the more like confused or psychotic or delusional arena daily to begin to find a way to work with the process to find something positive or capture the dream? Like this person's son was diagnosed with schizophrenia at the age of 18 and is soon to be 28 and hasn't really found their way. Any ideas or tips for someone that's kind of like, or maybe for the people that are trying to help someone like that, what they might get going with?
I'll kick off with that one. Two things that I'd like to say is, one is that I don't know. The honest answer is I don't really know. I'm not there yet to be able to do that with people, and that is my goal ultimately, is to be able to provide that, which is why I've written my book, you know, to tell that story and people read it and relate. And so I don't know, but you can't control another person, but you can provide that, model that, and provide that yourself. So if you're not treating them and you're not falling into their language and the way that they're describing it, if you use your own language, or I don't know, if you want to model a different approach towards them that then they're not getting around them, then I think that's going to be helpful, because you can't make anybody else do anything else or think anything else. Like, I don't know, but if you see it differently, you're not calling them sick and all of that kind of stuff, then I think that's going to be helpful. That's all I got.
Yes. Yeah, I agree that one thing that when I'm supporting people through these processes is that I always need permission from the person, no matter where they're at. Like if they're deep in their process or their experience, if they can at least give permission or say yes to the support, then we can get somewhere. Before that, if it's deep and there's no permission given, it's like, what can we now just do to listen and nourish? listen and nourish their experiences. And the way that we're able to help to nourish the experience is by, of course, being an active listener, but like you said, Emma, I agree, like being the example or being invitational, not telling them what to do or that it's wrong, or all the languages that we use and the things that we automatically go to, but having those sensitivities to help to bring nourishment. And sometimes that nourishment is suggestions around, suggesting being outside, sitting on the earth, like really simple things, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that it's some big spiritual thing that that a person has to do, but it's just like, can we, take 5 minutes and lay on the earth, or, asking the person, well, how can I nourish you at this time? Bringing invitations of less isolation and more togetherness, even in that time, because we have, one of the things that I noticed is that someone was talking about disunity, and you mentioned disunity is like the energy of separation creates illness. And so when we are in this space of separation, and where we tend to compare our illness to others, our situations to others. Nobody else is going through this. I have the toughest, roughest thing that's happening, and just being a space holder to let the person know that we are in this together. That even what you're experiencing, I may not fully understand it, I may not fully, but how can I nourish you? How can I bring nourishment? How can I remind you of nourishment? And even if a person can't go outside and even agree to going outside, like placing some flowers in front of them in the room, plants, like doing little things to bring nature back inside the space, so yeah, these are just a few of my suggestions, but the permission is so important. It's like you can't move or do anything without the permission.
Thanks. Here's a specific question for you, Gogo. Were the initiation medicines or herbs you took psychedelic medicine? And do you believe what we're talking about can happen through ketamine therapy or ayahuasca or something like that?
Yes. So when I first started out on this journey of my spiritual emergence and awakening, there were two medicines that came to me. One was the Kosa dream medicine, in the medicine of initiations. There's different kinds, but there's specific ones that are medicine of initiations that I didn't know about, just kind of came. And the second medicine was Yahe, ayahuasca. And particularly in my practice, I do not serve psychedelics. I do not serve things that are altering in that way. I do partake in that as an upkeep, a maintenance, a continued way for me to access growth experiences and renewal in my work. So I do actively partake in psychedelics. However, it's not something that I serve. The Bangoma medicines of South Africa, there are psychedelics as well. These the plant medicines that we use that I use are mainly very earthing, very grounding, that help you to get the legs of support that you need in order to deal with everything that's happening at the top here, the head. And all the emotion here, the heart and the head, right? So these plant medicines that I worked with really are very subtle in helping to bring transformation, helping you to face yourself, helping you to push beyond fear, and helping you to to respond, open perspective and respond differently. So they are very, some of them are very low in any type of psychoactive or have little to none. What they do is activate dream space. Yeah, so it's important, like when we go into these rites of passages, we know that we can begin to speak to, each medicine has a spirit. We can begin to speak to the spirit of the medicine in terms of what it is needed, what is needed in terms of activating for a particular person on their journey. And so someone who is not having any remembrance of dreams or wants to grow spiritually and wants to be in the energy of opening vision, then there's medicine for that. And then if there's somebody that's completely like top heavy, meaning all the experiences are coming through the ears or the crown or the third eye, the vision, or even channeling, then we need the earth rooting grounded medicines to be able to give and support the legs, which are not psychoactive.
Okay, great. Here's a question for both of you. During your, what we may call upgrade and opportunity, did you experience what some people have called the Messiah experience, feeling like you were like a prophet or Jesus or another godlike person, anything like that?
Yes, I did, definitely. I call it the Christ consciousness. Because of my psychology degree, I knew not to go around saying, "Hey, I'm Jesus." But, and I didn't think I was Jesus. I knew I had the Christ consciousness coming through me. And since more recently, in the last few years, what's coming through is what I call the Magdalene. So I don't give it that same language. I believe I'm experiencing awareness and different energetic sensitivity. So I won't necessarily believe my thought, I am Jesus, I'll just be like, oh, a bit more curious. But yeah, I've had that. Yeah. And I'm not Christian. It's not like I didn't seek out, like I wouldn't, it's not my religion, I didn't have any religion.
Mm-hmm. So Gozani, yes, I have not actually had the experience of being Messiah. I have connected to Christ consciousness energy as well, but I have helped many people who have had these experiences, and what I've noticed is that sometimes there is this these divine things that are coming through, and at the same time, the energy of our virus or the thing that plagues us is also coming through at the same time. And so, as I spoke before, this idea of bipolarism or bipolar, it's like this is high or this is low or this is, it's also with energy. And what we're trying to do is attempt to bring these things into a level so that you can hear clearly, so that you can see clearly. And some of these messages and codes that are being channeled through is because you're seated and you may have a gift to be able to experience these things, or the energy of Christ consciousness or a higher consciousness or perspective or your higher self is coming in. And at the same time, there's all these things within the cord of your existence that's clogged. And so it becomes distorted. It can become distorted, right? We can have both polarities. And so what I've learned to do over time is to find where we can create a balance so that, and again, the medicine support us in creating, okay, where is the information that's coming in? The way we see it spiritually is that there's a cord that's clogged and it needs to be plunged. So we must go through cleansing processes and things that help us to release, like the old, right? You were speaking about that, Ron, the old software, so that the new information can come through and come through clean as opposed to distorted.
I'd just like to add something that people might be interested in and relate to is, which follows on from what Gogo's saying, is that so quite often what's followed the Christ consciousness is the devil. So, and I believe that awakening is not all about the love and the light. It's really the shining that light on the darkness. And the devil comes up too, and just riding with the devil is part of it too.
Gogo, what would you recommend as a way for people to access the teachings you're talking about, or something similar, or something with similar value? Any recommendations?
In terms of, I think as we have this term in around Sankofa, it means to go back and return. So that means take an eye or a vision to an indigenous teaching, a path that seems like maybe old or ancient or archaic, but there's, finding the medicine in that. So finding the medicine in that in your own lineage, or outside your lineage, it really doesn't matter. It's all earth, it's all ours to access. And so going in and seeking indigenous healing knowledge, wisdom, respectfully, in a sacred way, of course, and honoring the container and the faculties of what that means when you enter into those spaces. I offer also just, offer a couple of workshops. One is an Ascension Madness workshop that's coming soon, so you can just keep track if that's something that you want to learn more about. And also Rites of Passage, which is the indigenous medicine rites that help us to go through our birthright again, our childhood again, our when we became an adult, from adolescence to adult, and then into our eldership. There are processes that we can that help us, and there is a container that carry us through those rites that help create healing for us. So whether it is through your own spiritual practice and finding people, indigenous circles, or just people who have this wisdom that they're carrying, the medicine of the elements, like the fire, air, earth, water, metal, when they're carrying this and it resonates, I would say go explore those things.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Gogo. I just want to make and I think maybe Gogo, you have to take off at 10:30. So we are going to stay open, and Emma's offered to stay and answer some more questions. And then and I also want to invite our executive director of ISPS-US wants to jump in and say a few words to you before you leave. But then feel free to stay on, and we're going to have more question and answer. But Gogo, thanks so much for showing up and sharing with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
Thank you, Ronnie. I just really wanted to express my thanks to both you, Gogo, and Emma for sharing your story. It's just been such a powerful experience hearing you talk about the unique ways in which you have navigated those experiences and that spiritual journey you've both been on. I also wanted to thank everyone else for attending. Those of you who were able and in a position to donate, I want you to feel really assured that your investment in us is going to promote perspectives and understanding, such as what Gogo and Emma have put forth today. We're really trying to push back against this dominant narrative that beds and meds are the only way to work through psychosis. And there are much deeper ways for us to engage with these experiences, grow through experiences, and we want to share that with everybody. I love the networking that's going on in the chat. I see people sharing resources and contact details. I want to invite people who've attended to join us as a member. We have so many ways in which you can continue this conversation together through our email discussion group, our Facebook groups. We have a creative online sharing space where we come together to share our artistic creations and reflect upon those. And we also have a book club. And right now we're reading Emma's book, My Beautiful Psychosis, and having a great time sharing our reflections and sharing our experiences through reading that. So just take a look at our website, ISPS-US.org. Take a look at our membership rates, and I hope you'll join us. I hope you'll join us for our conference in November, taking place in Sacramento, California, but also hybrid online. Feel free to attend as an attendee, but also if you want to present and you have your own unique experiences, we're also looking for proposals to come through. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Gogo and Emma. Again, just wonderful. I feel like I've been enriched just through listening to you. So for those of you who can stay and want to keep talking, please do. Otherwise, thanks for joining us, and thank you, Ron, for hosting.
All right.
Thank you, Ron. Yeah, thank you, Emma. I appreciate you so much. Thank you, audience, so much. I appreciate you. It's been a beautiful time. Thank you so much.
Oh, bye-bye, Gogo. It's been an honor being on here with you. Come to England, please.
Of course. Take care.
All right. So Emma, somebody has a question. Like they work in an agency and they're encouraged to use like evidence-based practices and stuff. But any thoughts about how people that maybe are using some of the more formal methods might try to weave some of the things that you've talked about into their practice? And maybe you've even seen certain professionals who know how to do that. Any comments you have about that?
I think the one that's coming to my mind as being the one most obvious and already sort of seeping in quite a lot is mindfulness. That's being introduced along with peer-supported open dialogue in the UK. The UK version brings mindfulness practices in, but actually it's for the mental health professionals themselves. They're not really there to teach the person at the center of concern or the social networks. They're using mindfulness to become more aware of themselves and where they want to fix and be the big hero or whatever whatever's going on, is like to just be more aware of themselves and the space that they're creating. But I think mindfulness is a bit more acceptable out there. And open dialogue is currently being trialed in the UK. So there could well be in the next few years evidence base for open dialogue to be showing that 70% of people coming into the services with open dialogue within 2 years are living a fulfilled life, back to work. And whereas at the moment about 70% of people coming into services are returning within 2 years. So there is even a whole new system of mental health care being trialed. Yeah, that's all I can say about that.
Okay, so somebody is especially interested when these experiences first happen, and they're curious, like what ideas maybe helped you navigate your very first experience, maybe some pre-existing understandings you had that helped you at just the beginning, if you can think back that far.
I can remember it quite well. I don't know really. I just rolled with it. I wasn't afraid of it. I just kind of made sense of it as I went along. Well, not sense of it, but I made a positive sense of it as I went along. Like when I was in the waiting room, waiting to see the psychiatrist at the hospital, suddenly all these words and sentences and letters were all over the wall. Now they weren't physically there, nobody else could see them, but I could see this graffiti had been scribbled in pen all over the wall, and I was looking around. I didn't need to read any of it, but what it said to me was, oh, these are all the people who've been in this room before. These are all the people around me, and although I didn't feel alone anymore. Like even though I was alone, I didn't feel alone. you know, that there was some kind of presence. And I think I started to struggle once I got the perception of me from the outside world. That was when it bothered me. I was all right with it. I was actually okay with everything. Even bizarrely, even like looking at the smoke alarm and thinking, oh, they're filming me. It was like, I'm a documentary filmmaker. That'll make a cool film, you know. Okay. So I don't. It's not really very helpful for anybody. It was just my attitude. It was just. I think it might have been because I said, okay, I'm giving up cannabis, and no matter what, I'm going with it. You know, here we go, whatever this is. And I just seem to kind of enjoy the experience in a way. But then I haven't really been taunted by too much that's more difficult, I don't think. I don't know why that is. Yeah, I don't know why that is.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Perceiving that you're about to die can be sort of difficult.
Right, okay, yeah. I play it down a bit, don't I? Yeah. Well, I mean, one time I actually called the ambulance, you know, and said, I feel like I'm going to die and I need some help, you know. I need some help to die, because I thought, I don't want to do this on my own, you know. I'd had that, I think I'm going to die twice before. I don't want to be alone. I don't want to do it alone. And so I thought it would be a good idea to call the ambulance, like just in case I did die, and that I'd get some help. And, you know, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and they knocked on the door and bashed down the door and, you know, came into the house to see him, like, because they're thinking I'm going to kill myself, you know. And my ex-husband sat up in bed and was like suddenly at 3 in the morning, awakened by these ambulance people busting the door down, and he goes, it's all right, my wife's psychotic. And, you know, I didn't like that bit, but I just wanted to get some help. So I don't know, I don't actually know how to help anybody else with it, you know. I'm just finding out as I go along, and I don't get that experience anymore. Bizarrely, now I've mastered, like, oh, the ego, death, it's not a bad thing. It doesn't actually happen anymore. So something gradually, you know, I became more accustomed to it. So I think the best thing I can say to anyone is just hang on for dear life, and don't believe everything you think, you know. Don't believe anything you think.
Okay, yeah. That relates to what someone was saying about, like, how to get to where you don't believe some of the stuff that's not true, but you're saying keep alive a certain, you know, skepticism that things might not be quite what they seem. Or now, didn't you say before your first psychotic episode, had you already kind of like studied literature and interpreting literature and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I'd done an English degree, so I studied literature at university.
Yeah. I think, like, some people that have studied that, that's actually really helpful in the psychological field. I know Eleanor Longden had studied literature, if you know Eleanor Longden.
Yeah, I know Eleanor Longden.
Yeah, right. And so her ability to look at things in multiple ways and maybe not be so scared by weird experiences. Oh, this might mean this might mean that. I think it's actually a very helpful skill and would be usefully learned more, rather than in the medical field. Often it's like, well, this is this and it's definitely that, and that's what it means, and this is the color pill you give, you know, is really not the most helpful approach. And open dialogue, of course, is much more open. Well, there may be multiple ways to look at this. Let's explore some of the ways of looking at it and what we might make of something.
Yeah, and I'd read about Carl Jung and R.D. Laing in my psychology degree. So I was kind of really interested in this abnormal psychology and really fascinated by the experience. And I remember at university, I was trying to find out, like, you know, what were the causes, and there was one system saying, oh, it's a brain chemical imbalance, and then the other theories saying, well, it's like social, you know, it's a social thing. And I remember asking the tutor, I said, look, there's this theory and there's this theory, but which one is it? And he said, well, I think the point is, Emma, is that we don't know. And I thought, well, why am I studying this thing where we don't know? Well, you don't know, like, is that or that? You know, I was horrified. And I was always more interested in paranormal psychology at university, but it was a bit uncool. So I was a bit ashamed to go down that route. And before I went to university, I actually, after I'd finished school at 18, you know, I started to read whatever I wanted to read. I wasn't being stuffed with educational text. And I discovered I was really interested in spiritual stuff. You know, I was reading Shirley MacLaine and Colin Wilson, Life After Life, and all this was new to me. And, you know, given a free rein, that was what the choice that I made to feed myself with. But I realized it was a bit frowned upon and a bit uncool, and I just kind of hid it away when I went to university. It was like this, oh no, we're critical here and intellectual, and it's all got to be proven and evidence-based. And so I remember feeling a bit ashamed of all these books on my bookshelf and sent them off to charity. And then when I started writing, actually, when I came out of my first episode at home, one of the first things I did was started to write about it. And I remember the first line was, I used to have romantic ideas about insanity. And that had come from literature and art and Picasso and, you know, the literary greats are all a bit out there. And I really envied that, you know, we used to see that artistic temperament as a romantic thing, but now it had happened to me. It didn't feel that way at all. It felt really, really shameful. And so I completely agree with what you're saying about literature. You know, I did have that background idea about it was a romantic thing, you know, to become insane. And that line made it into my final version of the book, actually. It's not the first line, but it is still in there.
Yeah, that was very helpful to me, I think, both literature and reading stuff like Artie Lang when I started to having kind of out there experiences that made me not scared of them. And I think that's important because too much fear of them actually often makes them worse. It just makes people more upset, and then their upsetness contributes to more disturbing experiences, and it becomes a vicious circle.
Right. That's a great insight, Ron. Thank you. I hadn't really realized that about myself. Thank you.
Yeah. So somebody has a question about, like, maybe anything that helped you learn to talk so clearly about what goes on in your mind and imagination. This person has a hard time describing them and tends to get lost in thoughts. Any tips for how to find your way through?
Well, I don't think I could do it immediately, you know, that just took time. I couldn't communicate. I have been mute at times. I found that so hard when I'm actually in the experience to reach out of it, to communicate. It feels a bit pointless. It feels like, well, the rest of the world are in a completely different world, so there's no point in me talking about it. And I'm very self-contained. I don't necessarily talk about things that easily, but I think I trained as a shiatsu therapist, so I did shiatsu for 10 years, and learning to access the energetic in my body, like emotions in my body that I'd buried, and allowing that energy through, and then also sometimes giving that a voice. I've learned the benefit of it, you know, even like sometimes I will say something like to try it on for size, like I don't know what I'm going to say, and I say it, and that seems to unlock something huge in me that I didn't realize was there. So words can sometimes come first, but sometimes the energy and the emotion can come first, and then the words can come after. And words are incredibly powerful, and you know, they connect us with somebody else, take us out of isolation. But I'm always very careful about who am I saying this to, and why am I saying this to them? Like, is it helpful? Should I tell them this is what I'm experiencing? If they're going to see it that way, then no, actually, I'll keep quiet. And I think that's why I felt compelled to write the book when I came out of hospital, was like, I wanted to tell somebody, but I didn't know who to tell. So I wrote it. It's like, I'm just going to write it. And the amount of, like, it's had 10 drafts over years, and whittling it down and finding the right words has taken 7 years to write that book. And now I can speak to you about it. It's just keep practicing, just try it on, try something and then go, oh, that didn't work, and oh, go hide again. And, you know, just trial and error it and see how that goes. It's, you know, it's not always good to talk, but it's very good to talk if you're in isolation and with the right person. It's incredible medicine, incredible medicine. It's like, oh, I've come home, and it's healing, you know. So be wise about it as well. Be wise about it.
So, yeah, there's a practical question about talking in your book. Is your book tour coming near Southampton at all soon?
I don't know if that's somebody I know. That's a second request for Southampton. I am trying. Look, I've managed to get this beginning sorted, and I'm trying to find libraries, bookshops, mental health groups, whoever's out there, you know, to help me, because it's so much to organize. So Southampton's on my radar, but I haven't even got to the point where I'm contacting anybody in Southampton yet. So if that person knows of a bookshop, a library, anything to do with a mental health service, or anything really that might welcome me, I could really do with some help organizing it all, because it's such a mammoth task, and I'm completely on my own doing this. It's just me doing it.
Let's see. Someone says they identify as a Christian and they've had experiences that they feel are distressing and seem evil, and then others that appear to be beautiful and generative. However, they're realizing that some of the things that they view as evil may be difficult parts of themselves that they need to work with and through, and that some of what they see as good can be overstimulating. So how do you differentiate what is helpful for you and healthy versus what's detrimental?
Wow, that is a great question. I think that person should be doing this webinar. That's a great question. How do I distinguish what's good and what's helpful? Well, at the moment, and this is going to change, but it is just at the moment, because it changes with time, you know. I have committed until further notice to stay out of hospital. So that's my guiding star, you know. I completely agree that those more beautiful, positive, light states, I can have the tendency to climb up in my mind higher and higher and higher, and like try to stay up there. And what Gogo was saying was, you know, grounding is essential. So it's like recognizing in myself, is this really great? Or is this like an avoidance great? It's like a fantasy great. It's like, ooh, get carried away great. You know, you have to be really honest with myself. Is it like all-rounded great? Am I grounded to the floor and having this powerful experience? And then the darker stuff, forgotten the question, like how do I distinguish what's helpful for that? I guess if it's unsettling enough, like if I can ride it, if I can say, okay, so the devil's at my door, okay, you know, and I know that's an aspect of my psyche, and you know, I can be okay with this experience that I'm having, then I'll allow it and ride it and stay with it and not act from it. But if it's actually it's just too frightening and unsettling, and I want it to stop, and there is a way that could help me that's going to stop it, then I take that choice. Like with the Reiki example, it's like, okay, yeah, I feel like I've got this psychic attack and I don't know how to stop this. And that didn't feel like part of my psyche that I needed to integrate into wholeness. You know, all the aspects of ourselves somehow can differentiate, maybe not always, but you know, like the devil and the Christ, and that's part of integrating the whole of us. But sometimes there are energetic attacks that are coming from me, from spirit world, from spirits that are stuck or whatever, and yeah, and reach out for help when I need. I don't know if that's answered the question, but
It's a really tricky question.
It
I think
is.
sometimes some of the darker stuff, like let's say you encounter something that seems to want to kill you. And if you think, well, that that let's say it's telling you you have to kill yourself. And if you're taking that literally and pulling out your firearm and pointing it at your head, it may be really important to fight back
Yes.
against that. But at the same time, that same energy, if you interpret it a little differently, hey, this part is telling me I've got to die in some sense. And you might see there's actually a way that it's trying to help, and it's trying to help you die in a way that's going to be helpful. And that's, so it's how you take it. It's not just the thing itself, but how you take it. And that's tricky.
The other guiding star is, I've chosen, I want to stay in this 3D human world. And so anything that I'm doing, if I have a thought like that I think it might be good if I wade out to this river and experience what that's going to do. And if I was to drown, I would be curious about how it is to drown. You know, I go, well, I do want to be here in 3D. I've made that choice for myself. And before, when I had teams of people around me, I you know, the guidance for them would be to keep me safe, you know, physically here. And so I don't do anything that's going to endanger myself physically. And I make that decision when I'm not in that state. And so when I am in that state, I go, oh, alarm bell, because I don't really want to drown. That might be interesting, but so maybe, you know, get back onto the riverbank.
Yeah. So when people are really lost, someone makes a point of, like, there's what's called asygnosia, where you have maybe your disturbed mental state, but you don't recognize anything's wrong, or where you maybe are caught up in a delusion. And how do you figure out when maybe, let's say you have started to believe something that's not quite right, or at least it's not literally correct? What maybe helps you figure out what's more real?
I actually, in that state, I actually can't figure out what's real. And I think the point is, because I don't know, I can't be sure. So I opt for the benefit of the doubt. Like I go, oh yeah, so I feels like I'm being hacked, and everything's just hacked, my whole computer and my whole life and everything, they've hacked me. Or, you know, Google knows everything and they've just, you know, absolutely every single thing about me, and they're using, you know, that could be true. I go, because actually it could be true. There might be somebody going, God, Emma, she's got a book out now, you know, we really need to stop this woman, you know. And I go, well, actually that might be true, but it also might not be. I don't know. I might be in a delusional state. I might be in a state of fear and panic, and it might not be true. I don't know which is true. So I'm not going to act on either, but I might just switch my Wi-Fi off, just in, you know, in case that's how they're hacking. I'm not going to go on my computer for a few days, you know, like I might just act on it slightly. It might be true, so just in case it is true, you know. So yeah, I don't know what's true, and I can't tell you for sure now whether either is true, you know. I'm not experiencing it right now. Google may well be on this webinar going, right, okay, so, you know, they're coming, they're awakening.
Yeah, I think
Get the misinformation, disinformation story out there quickly.
so important in that whole discussion in itself, like how we think we know is true, and what if we're wrong, and what if something's going on that we don't. But I think that humility of not knowing really is very grounding in a way. It's very like,
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah.
know,
Also, I remember in my shiatsu course, we had to go through this process where in order to access our intuition, we had to say, I have no idea. And when I said that, I have never been more scared of giving a shiatsu treatment. I didn't know. Oh my God, I'm not an expert. I haven't got it all planned out. Oh my God, I don't know. I panicked. It was awful. I cried. I was like, ah. But when I said I don't know, it actually gave me access to something much more powerful than my mind could have ever done. And best treatments I've ever given is when I go, I have no idea. I don't know, and then my hands, okay, you just do it, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this. And not knowing is really, we don't have a clue, do we? We have no idea.
Great. Someone wonders if you experienced or work with someone in intense anger or very violent state, or so distressed that they felt suicidal, and any ideas about that?
Anger and suicide. Have I worked with someone? Is that the question?
Yeah.
To be honest, I haven't worked one-to-one with people in this state. I've witnessed other people doing it. So I've witnessed people really, really angry, and seen what happens in hospital to them. And I've worked with people in my shiatsu practice with anger, and I've worked on my own anger. But usually when I've got access to people who are in that state, I'm in that state as well, on a ward. So because I'm not working with people one-to-one and helping, I'm sorting myself out and bringing myself into the world at this stage of my life. So I need to focus on, okay, not getting involved because I need to protect myself in it. And what was the other? Anger and suicidal. Suicidal, I have actually. I had a friend who, he's been through this states, and I knew him really well, and he went through a clinical suicidal depressions, feeling very, very suicidal. And so I called him up every day and just listened, and just gave a loving, compassionate ear every day. So there was just a little bit of light and some little water on his heart and soul every morning. And I have more experience of that, and I think it helped me a little bit, but it's like, it's his journey. I could only do so much every day with him, but he was so open and receptive, and he wouldn't feel that when he was with me, and he would tune into my energy, and it was just, he'd be so light and lovely, and all of that's gone. But ultimately he had to find that in himself, because I can't be with him all of the time. But I absolutely love, now the name escapes me, but Eckhart Tolle, and there's a guy, because he had suicidal thoughts, and that was his breakthrough, that was his awakening, because he realized, oh, I want to kill me, there's an I and a me that I want to kill. And he realized, which is he, and that broke him open. So again, like Gauguin was saying, it's all an invitation. And there's another guy, and I can't remember his name now, it escapes me, but his has wonderful videos about that actually when he admitted it to himself, a part of him did want to die, like life that he was living, he wanted to die. It was an opportunity to awaken the part of him that wanted to live. And why was that dying? Because living this, but sorry, that's not very helpful.
Oh, yeah, I think, what you've offered has been really helpful, and we do have to wind it up now. I think you got through most all the questions, and I really appreciate you staying longer for this, and it's just been wonderful, and I look forward to reading the rest of your book. I got a little start on it. So
Thank you.
thanks so much for showing up, and thanks for everybody that did show up for this webinar, and we will try to get the recording out within a day or two, and I'll keep the chat open for just a minute for people that have some final thing to say. Thanks a lot, Emma.
Thank you very much, Ron. It has been an absolute pleasure.